of which is that very often our speakers are retirees or folks nearing retirement. And the traditional convocation or graduation address is someone who's been around, someone who's been there and done that, who provides words of wisdom, or at least words of, don't do this. In contrast, Daniel is relatively new on his journey because his goals have been to teach at area community colleges, and so many of you share those goals. But others of you are seeking a position using history in some form or format. Others of you are more interested, as that I says, in world domination. Whatever you're interested in, I think that you might benefit from Danny's humorous take on his experiences at UC Santa Cruz and San Jose State, his experiences looking for a job using history in the midst of the worst recession since the Great Depression of the 1930s, finding his spots, or his initial spots, and then trying to apply some of what he's learned in the process. During his last year as a graduate student here at San Jose State, Danny began doing stand-up comedy. Since then, he's performed at comedy festivals such as Laugh Fest. He's co-produced a monthly show at the San Jose Improv. And he opened for Paul Mooney, who's headlined on the Richard Pryor Show and the Chappelle Show. He's going to talk to us today about how life imitates the World Series. And he promised me he would keep it Tonight Show clean. Daniel Allen.
Sounded really good, actually. Bringing it all in. How's everyone doing? Good. All right. We are living in a time when we can honestly say to each other, American Idol has produced a candidate for the United States Congress. The other night I said that to my mom, and her response was, so did Cher. I wasn't sure how or where to begin this today, so I decided it was best to heed the advice of Holden Caulfield, who said, if you really want to hear about it, the first thing you'll probably want to know is where I was born, what my last childhood was like, how my parents were occupied before they had me, and I'll let David Copperfield kind of crap. I'm sure you don't want to hear that, but we're going to do that anyways, okay? I was born a little over 4 months after the launch of MTV, and a little less than 11 months after the inauguration of Ronald Reagan. My parents were both Spartans in the late 1960s, try to only remember me and early MTV. I highlight these events just to let everyone know what follows are the words of someone raised by liberals and television. My mom was a teacher and a union president. She currently does gate testing in order to receive full benefits, which is a reality we should all wrap our brains around when we hear talking points about tenure, compensation for public employees. My dad is a CPA and is also responsible for the guiding music of Bessie Smith in my life. Both my mother and father are the descendants of Democrats. My paternal grandmother's side, however, did produce some Republican allies in the 1860s. But that was in Missouri. Arguably the state that most epitomized the fratricidal nature of the American Civil War. So, my family descends from some of the first Irish Catholics to ever settle New Jersey, Protestants in the Show Me State, Sicilian grocers in Upper Manhattan, and Neapolitan coal miners in Pennsylvania. By 1960, all sides had eventually settled in California. So believe me when I tell you, it was an amazing experience to study here, in this department, with so many professors responsible for some remarkable work on the American West. It rings true on both an intellectual and personal level. Not to mention so many other fields of study I would be ignorant of if not for the chance to attend relatively affordable public universities. Although my mom paid $200 tuition here in 1970, so I could be a lot more grateful. Remember the whole part I said about Reagan. Don't worry though, don't worry. I'm not going to use this. I'm not going to use this opportunity for political posturing. But anyone interested in sharing the knowledge you've gained with students at the community college level or even the university level later on need to understand that it really only works if enough people believe in the American system. If enough people believe that affordable education and the occasional subsidy for the arts are essential elements of the pursuit of happiness. It only works if America is more John Quincy Adams, less Andrew Jackson. But I'd still rather have a beer with Andrew Jackson. So I'm grateful for the opportunity America has allowed for me to study and instruct at public institutions of higher learning. I was born on December 12th, which is the same day as the feast of the Virgin of Guadalupe in Mexico. 2 years ago, I actually had the experience to visit Mexico City and the Basilica de Guadalupe. There, every December 12th, 2 million people enter the Basilica to view the oldest known depiction of the Virgin. Mexico is an excellent example of the element of history I appreciate most, the element I project into my classroom the most, paradox, or nuance. I haven't really decided which word I prefer to. It is their hybrid culture that produces this paradox. They are the descendants of both the conqueror and the conquered. And this paradox is ever present in their daily interactions. During the last presidential election in Mexico, which I was present for, I heard a lot of speeches delivered from stages and impromptu debates between rank and file voters on the street that employed the language of Marx, Kropotkin, the language of the proletariat, which, although originally from Europe, was applied through the lens of the indigenous experience. A major paradox in our country is ideological. It is a perpetual dance between states' rights and an active federal government, the individual and the collective, the sharing or Huron statement. We built it, and it takes a village. The Tea Party and Occupy Wall Street. This may be why baseball is the quintessential pastime of our nation. It embraces both the individual and the collective. The pitcher's amazing curveball is only amazing if there is a competent shortstop to field the ground ball it produces. The shot heard around the world may be contributed to Bobby Thompson, but it would not have been possible if not for the other members of the New York Giants who managed to get to first base, proceeded to steal second, then proceeded to steal the pitching signs from the Brooklyn Dodgers. Like baseball, teaching is a profession in which your abilities as an individual are vital, but only truly effective if supplemented by interacting with your students and peers. Education is not an island of intellectual exploration. It is a community of collective growth. But like the pitcher alone on the mound, or the batter alone, at least offensively, at the plate, it is inevitable for individuals within a community to branch off, find new opportunities, and generate new collectives for growth. Even the real-life Bill Gates, or the fictional Howard Rourke, both college dropouts, were inspired by at least one professor. Paradox is a presidency filled with economic expansion, free trade agreements, severe cuts in welfare, and deregulation of Wall Street, yet defined by adultery, mysterious blue dresses, and what the definition of is. As Thomas Boswell stated in his 1983 book, How Life Imitates the World Series, what most people want to keep under wraps is trivial petty jealousies, professional feuds. By contrast, most of the things they have thought about most seriously all of their lives, they're perfectly willing to uncover. Paradoxes of democracy built on the backs of slave labor, or a black president who is the descendant of slave owners, but not slaves, or a millionaire cattle rancher who cries oppression, or a public university that requires thousands of dollars in tuition. But rather than resist what seems irrational, perhaps we should embrace it. After all, in the immortal words of Bill Hicks, it's just a ride. We should embrace the time we're living in. It is truly amazing. When I graduated from high school in the year 2000, the world was a different place than when I finished my studies at UC Santa Cruz in 2007. I know there's a 7-year gap there. And that world in 2007 was vastly different from the one I found myself in when I left this university in 2011. When I left Santa Cruz, 2 wars of occupation, not the economy, headlined our national debate. In Field of Dreams, Ray Kinsella says of his experience at Berkeley, he marched, smoked some grass, tried to like sitar music. I can only attest to 2 of those experiences while at Santa Cruz. I marched with an organization called Students Against War, an organization classified by the Defense Department as a credible threat to national security. But this may seem troubling if you never attended one of our meetings which were non-hierarchical and attended mostly by Leninists and anarchists. So trust me, if we were a credible threat to anything, it was definitely consensus. But I did not participate in the anti-war movement because of activism. Right? I'm not an activist. Like you, I'm a student of history. And as a student of history, and a child of parents who came of age during the Vietnam War, it was important for me to engage in some activity I could look back on and say, I was there, tried to do something. Which is really just a nice way of saying, I told you so. Something historians and pretty much everybody love to do. For this same reason, I recall distancing myself at a demonstration in Portland several years ago from a man who had just set fire to the American flag. Not because the act was unlawful. It's not. But I thought about looking back on this experience later in life. Did I want to remember that my criticism of certain policies led to the burning of an entire nation and what it stands for in effigy? I guess the point of the story is that one can be passionate without being impulsive. I try and heed this advice at all times, with relative success. I try and heed this advice when I'm engaged in discussion with students in the classroom or in an online class. And I need to stop here since I'm sure there were some internal or even some audible snickers at the phrase online class. You will, in any career path, be filling the void left by people who may not have grown up with social media like you have. You should embrace that. You should incorporate it into your class. YouTube is your friend. And recognize the fact that physical decentralization, coupled with communications integration, have made online instruction not only inevitable, but beneficial. I hope I'm passionate enough about the course to engage my students to stay motivated and maybe, hopefully, gain some appreciation for history. But this usually involves a lot of dialogue on race, class, gender, and many other general themes that can quickly spiral into entrenched polarization. But you should not, especially as an instructor, you should not be impulsive. Impulse is for arguing with an old friend about universal background checks on Facebook. The class you are teaching is not Facebook. This is an obvious, yet important reality to remember. There may come a day when, if you end up teaching or facilitating a discussion as a TA, that you will encounter someone who usually looks like me, only 10 to 15 years younger, who just finished reading The Fountainhead. This person may have the ability to take a discussion on the mill girls of 19th century Lowell, Massachusetts, and turn it into a referendum on Benghazi. It happens, trust me. Be passionate about your role as a teacher. Embrace the ideological journey your students are on, and at times restate the common values you, and in some cases the required text, feel are important. But do not engage this student in a discussion after watching hours and hours of MSNBC. And I mean the full gauntlet, like Al Sharpton, Rachel Maddow, Ed Show. The Ed Show is basically Bill O'Reilly's persona with the ideology of Bill Haywood. It's a U.S. history show, there you go. But don't be impulsive, sleep on it. I would say turn off political news and turn on ESPN. But it seems as though we're entering one of those periods where politics and sports are once again becoming inseparable. Whether we're equating the Staples Center to a plantation, watching a multi-ethnic same-sex couple make out during the NFL draft, or listening to demands for collective bargaining rights by athletes in the Big Ten. But we're used to politics and sports being combined here at State, and we have the statutes to prove it. So I'm not sure how to end all this or how to tie it together, so I'll simply give an example of some of these words in practice. As I was preparing once to write my first lecture on Reconstruction, I asked Professor Genzel for some advice, and he relayed the importance of including what he called juicy quotes. And I believe, just for the record, I believe there were at least 4 or 5 quotes in there. So I have your approval. And here's one more. Whether you teach, whether you work at a library or a museum, or you TA for classes down the road, you're going to feel frustration, especially when it comes to pay-related issues. So I recommend when the time comes, remind yourself of what Hyman Roth said in The Godfather Part 2. This is the business we've chosen. Thank you very much.